What's the ideal situation for Auburn football this weekend?
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I'm your host, Zach Blackerby, and thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. This bonus edition of the show, this happy hour edition of Locked On Auburn, features a conversation with our guy, Ben Taylor of Auburn Opelika this morning on News Talk WANI. Talk a little Auburn hoops, as well as what do we need to see this weekend for Auburn football. Here's that conversation.
Man, Zach, football-wise, injury to Peyton Thorne, or at least resting a shoulder. Some other guys have seen some action.
Yeah.
I honestly don't really care who's in at quarterback as much as I care how many times number 27 touches the football this Saturday against Louisiana Monroe. And not even that's not fair. I should not say that. How much our running backs in general touch the football this Saturday as they take on Monroe.
Yeah, from a game plan point of view, does it matter? Like, does Jarquez and Jeremiah and Damari getting more touches than normal against, a ULM team that Auburn should beat handily?
Yeah.
FanDuel has the line at 23.5 as we record this, Ben. So I don't know. Does it matter? I mean, I do think the perfect situation is Auburn shows some sort of, competence on offense, and that may come from running the football. So I'm not pushing back in that regard, but I don't know if you can go into this game thinking, man, I hope Jarquez Hunter gets, 20 touches when it shouldn't matter. Like, you should be able to run the football on this team. You should be able to pass the football on this team. You should be able to score points against this ULM team.
Should this be a game Saturday like what we saw the first game of the year? Is that too far-fetched to think? More of a balanced option, run the football. You saw the quarterbacks throw the ball well in the first game of the year, put up a bunch of points. Defense didn't really get tested in game one like they did later. So I think the defense is way further along now than what they were in game one. So should our expectations, not necessarily the line, which that is kind of a high number in my opinion with what Auburn's put out.
I agree.
What Auburn's put on tape. Yeah. For what we've seen on tape over the last few weeks, that's a high number in my opinion. But is it unfair for fans to expect what we saw game one to see that this Saturday?
As far as like game plan or as far as production?
Both. I will say both.
Well, not production. I mean, I think ULM's a better team than New Mexico and Alabama A&M. So I think they're significantly better than both of those teams. As far as game plan, like, it was pretty balanced, if I recall, against Alabama A&M, and then it looks like they wanted to let Hank throw the football a lot against New Mexico. So if Hank starts again, do they go with a similar game plan because it worked against the New Mexico team? That's probably the most comparable as far as competition. No, because I think ULM is better than New Mexico, so I don't even want to say that.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, I think you always want to be balanced, or at least they say that they want to be balanced, and then they find ways to keep passing the football. But if it's Hank, it makes more sense to let him throw it more because you need him to be as comfortable as possible, assuming this is Peyton getting benched for the rest of the season instead of like just another week if it truly is a shoulder. I mean, there's so many variables that go into this, but if Peyton goes out there, I mean, I expect them to maybe run a little bit more because of his shoulder. But if it's Hank, like, I wouldn't be shocked if it was a similar game plan like it was against New Mexico earlier this year.
What decisions are going into the coaches' heads? Because you and I mentioned this before. Now, this is a far-fetched idea, but Auburn could win this weekend, possibly upset A&M, possibly upset Alabama. I don't know if they'll upset the Alabama team that showed up against LSU.
No, I don't know if anybody is.
But they could upset the Alabama team that showed up against Vanderbilt. So possibly upset Alabama. You win 3, then you're bowl eligible. And Charlie Five, Kyle Rush on Top Button Tuesdays when I visited with him, he actually had mentioned, listen, Auburn could probably even get into a bowl at 5-7 just because that happens now from time to time, especially with the playoffs and some of the extra bowls that are out there. So everybody makes it sound so easy, like just sit Peyton and start looking towards the future. But if you're looking to keep guys engaged for the rest of the year and there's an opportunity to play a bowl game, get some extra practices in and that kind of stuff, you got to kind of take that into consideration as well.
Well, that's only true if you buy into the fact that playing Peyton is the best thing for the team this year. And I mean, clearly the coaching staff believes that, but Auburn's won 3 games this year, and it's like two games with him as the starter.
Yeah, I was going to say 3 games, but only 2 with him as a starter. He's only got 2 wins.
So it's like, is that true? I don't know. I kind of hope it's not, right?
Yeah.
So that argument holds up unless you think, there's a chance that Peyton isn't the best option for you to win this week.
I think the biggest thing going in this week, try to stay injury-free because there is an opportunity for these guys to feel some success. I don't know, either against Texas A&M or against Alabama, just because every now and then when you back somebody into a corner, they kind of get ready to fight. And it just makes me wonder if the fight shows up, one of those last 2 games of the season.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my question with that is, has this team not felt like they were backed into a corner over the last month of the year? I mean, it feels like we had that conversation against Missouri, and they looked great. And then, we all know how that game ended. You beat Kentucky, and it kind of felt like that was a turning point. And then you dropped one against Vanderbilt, and it's like, I don't know, Ben. Like, I feel like this team's been backed in the corner for the majority of the season. And you've seen certain guys respond, but as a team, I don't think they have. So I don't know. Do they feel backed in a corner now, like hosting ULM? I don't know.
Well, I don't know what's going through their heads, because even staff wise, because the same called game that we saw against Kentucky was not the same call game we saw the following week against Vanderbilt.
Sure.
And so it makes me wonder. It's just almost like everybody's not really on the same page at this point. Now, defense is fine. I know there have been people that have argued, yeah, but the defense has given up 95-yard, drive against Missouri. I get that, but also they've been on the field quite a bit by the time that 95-yard drive took place. Same thing, a little bit later on against Vandy when they gave up a big drive to Pavia. Again, happened at the end, and you're talking about a team that's been out there a lot. So I'm pleased with the way the defense is handling themselves. You and I talked about it earlier in the season, Zach. This is just a team offensively. The expectations coming in, being an offensive guru such as what the staff has on its sidelines, you would think that it's not too much to ask for 21 to 28 points per game minimum out of this offense.
Yeah, I mean, I would take 21 points.
Yeah.
I mean, you scored 7 against Vanderbilt, and that's just going to stick with you until you prove that that's not who you are
right
at this point. And you look at it, it's like, okay, ULM, like, you should be able to score points against Texas A&M. Like, if I set Auburn's points at 19.5, does Auburn score 20 or not?
Yeah.
Against Texas A&M, like, I don't think they score 20 points. Do you?
No, not based on history. I mean, I look at the guys that are out there, and I look at the guys calling the plays, and I would think that they would, but
and it stinks. Like, that's brutal.
If you look at trends and you look at history and you watch tape, no. If you go with expectations and what you thought you would have coming into the season, you think yes. So you're torn between the two of them.
Yeah. Yeah. And look, I hope they do. Let's talk about basketball. They look really good. And you pointed out some interesting power rankings that 247 put together. And you got to like where the Tigers are. That's next right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Ben, can you imagine buying tickets anywhere other than the Game Time app?
No, and I saw where people bought Game Time tickets and tagged you guys in it in Houston.
That's right.
The Toyota Center.
That's right. Yeah. And I'm sure they were super stoked with their purchase as they were leaving the venue. But when they got to the venue, they already knew what to expect.
Yeah.
Because at game time, you can see that full panoramic view from the seat that you're purchasing. And so they weren't surprised at all. Looked like really good seats too. Hey, check out Game Time Picks. It curates your selection. It makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Ben, what time is it?
It's game time.
Yes. Thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. Ben Taylor.
Yes, sir.
You pointed out 247's power rankings. It's essentially their top 25. Essentially, it's my understanding of how this works. But Isaac Trotter puts out this list, and at the very top of all of college basketball, according to 247 and Ken Palm, the Auburn Tigers sit at number 1.
Oh, man, I know. It is after that performance. And listen, he gave great credit to Houston, who's in there at number 3. So it's not like
that's
Auburn,
almost a larger deal, honestly.
Yeah.
The fact that they kept Houston at 3.
Yeah, and I think Houston moved up. I think last week, and I don't have it pulled up in front of me, I think he had Houston at like 4 or 5. So them hanging with Auburn and there being an opportunity for Auburn or Houston to get the win this past Saturday, and the defense they got provided out of both teams.
Yeah.
That was an actual, everybody talks about it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. No, Saturday was a full sprint from the opening tip all the way to the end of the ball game. Nothing slowed down. Defensively, offensively, it was absolutely magnificent to see. I enjoyed it. You don't get to see those kind of games in November. Those are March games. Those are late February games. So it was just from a fan perspective, it was great. And Auburn coming in at number 1, some other SEC schools, Alabama at 5, Tennessee at 8. So you got 3 in the top 10, and then in the top 25 in general, Kentucky down at 16, Mississippi State at 21, Florida at 23, Arkansas at 24, which to me is shocking because Arkansas actually lost this weekend. So it's interesting that they've got Auburn at number 1. And I think, Zach, that has more to do with what you saw defensively and what Janai Broome showed he can do when you get him involved in a basketball game. And honestly, probably just the second half in general. Auburn looked like they could play with anybody and beat anybody in the country in the second half of that ball game on Saturday.
Yeah, they proved it, and they did it with depth. In Trotter's list here, going back to your point on Houston, he's talking about like how great Milos Uzan was, and he was great. He was great. They were plus 14 in Uzan's 31 minutes, but this stat is fascinating to me. Auburn outscored Kelvin Sampson's club by 19 points, and in 9 minutes, Uzan was on the bench in foul trouble. That's crazy.
That is wild. That is wild.
I didn't realize that until he just put that out there. We talk about depth. Like, that's what that looks like. That's what that looks like, because you're going to have games in big moments, especially with how physical both of those defenses were. Like, you're going to have guys in foul trouble, and Auburn had guys in foul trouble as well.
Well, Chad Baker-Mazara grabbed 2 in the first probably 2.5 minutes of the ball game.
Yeah, we didn't really feel a whole lot of impact from him until the end. And it's okay, here he is. Let's go.
That's the thing. When he got his 2, I was sitting there thinking that's going to be huge if he gets a third in the first half, because in the second half, as aggressive as Auburn is, he'll be gone in the first 10 minutes of the second half.
Yep.
And he was able to behave himself and keep his hands off of people, made some crucial shots at the end for Auburn when they needed it. And I think showed a little bit of maturity. You talked about the depth. The thing is what America didn't get to see are the 2 that would have added to the depth and at least given a few minutes because they were sitting at home. So this is something where if everything works out and they're able to get it worked out internally and those 2 players are still able to contribute to the team, moving forward, going into conference play, you're going to have even more of a bench to bring in the ball game than what we saw on Saturday, which is, and like Kelvin Sampson, he said afterwards, he said, I think they were missing 2 guys. Think of what kind of depth they would have had if they would have had another 2 to bring off the bench.
Yeah, a lot of horseplay.
Yeah.
A lot of horseplay going on.
A lot of
no
horseplay.
question. Yeah, and I can't wait to see those guys again, assuming we do see them again. I think we will. We may not this week. And Kyle and I joked about this yesterday where it's like, man, what a time to go on a 3-game suspension if that's the case, before they head to Maui. It's like, I got a feeling they're going to show up in Maui. Just a hunch. I don't know. Just a hunch, though, if I had to guess.
Well, don't get me wrong. I mean, Maui's great, but I mean, if the suspension carried over, if they go this long, I mean, Cameron Indoor, they would miss that too. And that's an experience that I think every college player should have. It's getting that way with Neville. And the reason I say that is because, I mean, you heard Miles Kelly talk about after his first game. He was like, these guys kept telling me what an electric place Neville was. And then I didn't believe him until I got out there and felt what the jungle could do for you.
Sure.
And listen, there were 2,000 people missing from there.
Yeah, it was Vermont.
It was Vermont. It's not even wait till the other 2,000 show up and get behind Miles.
Right.
It's a lot bigger and better. So, Cameron Indoor, it's that same feel. They don't have a lot. I've forgotten what it seats at Cameron Indoor, but they are right on top of you. And those students are very engaged and they stay late. And I think every player that goes in there says it was weird because they're so close, but I really loved it and I enjoyed it and I get it. Like every player will say, I get it. And so I hope they're not suspended for that, just for the experience alone. But I don't know what Bruce.
That'd be potentially, because I mean, you can play 3 games in Maui. It's like that'd be. They missed that. That'd be like a 6-game suspension.
I know.
I just can't.
I don't foresee that happening unless something. Unless there's something out there that we don't know, then that possibly. But
yeah, if Turtle, I think Turtle will be back by then.
Okay,
for sure. They may not have the same punishment.
Oh, I agree with that.
Because it does sound like, one instigated and then one just reacted. So we'll see. But all in all, props to this Auburn team for bouncing back. And so we will be able to see them Wednesday night. And of course, we'll go live right here as soon as that is over. So be sure to check that out. Ben, how can people check out everything you've got going on?
Monday through Friday, weekday mornings, you can catch me on News Talk WANI, News Talk WANI1400.com, aunetwork.com. Click on the WANI logo. Sports at 7 each and every morning with guests like Locked On Wednesday or like Top Button Tuesday or like Double D Daryl Dapprich Monday. So be sure to check us out as you can stream those each and every morning, Monday through Friday.
Yes, please like the video, please subscribe, and also go check out thebarnauburn.com. We'll see you next time. This has been Locked On Auburn.